Welcome to episode 211 of the Microsoft Cloud IT Pro podcast, recorded live on January 4th, 2021. This is a show about Microsoft 365 and Azure from the perspective of IT pros and end users, where we discuss a topic or recent news and how it relates to you. In the first episode of 2021, we discussed some new functionality around what if in Azure ARM templates, the ability to apply sensitivity labels to Teams, SharePoint sites, and Microsoft 365 groups, and even a little bit about the SolarWinds compromise in Ben's relaunched weekly newsletter. We have made it to 2021, Scott. We have successfully escaped 2020, and guess what? Absolutely,
it's all
nothing
the same.
Changed.
Yes, it's like we're right back in it. I don't know. I took a couple days off. I'm not very good at taking vacation, and I've taken a lot of vacation this year, and it has felt wonderful. Like, it was nice to just disconnect for a few days and not think about weird REST APIs or how to be an expert in Excel.
Yeah.
Like, that was all good.
I don't normally think about either of those two things, but I actually did as well. So I usually work, like Christmas Eve, I'll usually take it off. Sometimes I'll work a little bit in the morning, but I feel like I took more time off or did not work as much as normal over the Christmas and New Year's holiday. And I did work like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday last week, but it was a lot of just catching up on stuff, doing random, non-billable, non-client work, which actually felt kind of good too. I didn't get a lot of interruptions. I don't know if more people took off more than normal between Christmas and New Year's. I felt like it was abnormally slow this year in terms of the amount of emails I got.
It was pretty slow. I don't know how it is in other places, but I've noticed with a lot of my colleagues at Microsoft, like, I am back. It's Monday, January 4th. And all of a sudden this morning when I logged in and looked at email, a bunch of people had extended their vacations just a few extra days. Like, you know what? This being off thing's kind of fun. Let's do it again.
Yeah. No, I had the same thing. So I've been doing better. I have my Microsoft Cloud Report weekly newsletter that I've been sending. I'm on a 5-week run, which is doing well, and I hope to continue. But because of the way I have it set up, I get everybody's auto replies when I send out my newsletter, because it's set to come from my actual email address. And I was shocked at the number of auto replies I still got this morning when the newsletter went out.
Well, I mean, where do people sign up for your newsletter?
My newsletter, we will put a link in the show notes. If you go to intelligent.com, just go to I'm forgetting. This is what vacation does to me. mscloudreport.com. And it will actually redirect to a subpage on my Intelligent website. Name, email address, hit the button. That simple.
Gotcha. Nice and easy. And what can people find in your Cloud Report?
Cloud Report, all kinds of random stuff. So it does tend to be a little bit more focused on Microsoft 365 than Azure, but I have been trying to sprinkle Azure stuff in as well. So I usually write it Sunday nights. So Sunday night, I kind of sit down, look at all the news over the past week, and set it to send out Monday morning. So Monday morning, you can find anything you missed over the past week. I was trying before to do it like middle of the week, and frankly, with middle of the week stuff and kids and work and all that, I was having a hard time carving out time to write it like on a Monday night or Tuesday night or something like that.
Turns out that's hard to do, isn't it?
It really is. So I've started writing it over the weekend, and then it just goes out right away Monday morning with updates from last week, or even the last 2 weeks. Like this week, I focused a little bit on that SolarWinds compromise that happened.
Yeah, there was just a little bit of stuff that went down in that one.
A little bit of stuff. And I waited a little bit with that primarily because I think the compromise surfaced a lot like middle of December, maybe 3-4 weeks ago. But were you going to say something?
No.
Okay.
Keep going.
I was going to say, but since then, Microsoft came out with some updates. They made some announcements around some stuff they've done. They've published out some Azure Sentinel workbooks and some guidance that even though Microsoft 365 wasn't compromised, the SolarWinds compromised a lot of your Office 365 data. So Microsoft was very involved in seizing the domain, figuring out what it was doing, publishing reports around what types of things they saw happening in Office 365 because SolarWinds compromised a lot of credentials, and then providing some tools like an Azure Sentinel and other places to really help you see if SolarWinds compromised your credentials, which then led to a compromise in Office 365, and hunting for that potentially suspicious activity, getting alerted on potentially suspicious activity as a result of that. So there's a bunch of that type of stuff that's actually in the newsletter this week. And I try to give like a paragraph or two on my insights on some of these articles and then link to all the different articles that I've pulled through. So as you read through it, here's kind of a summary. Here's 3 or 4 links going with it to try to tie some of this stuff together. So bundle some of those topics together with various articles, information about it.
Gotcha. So sign up for Ben's newsletter, learn all about
the cloud.
Solari Gate or whatever the heck they're calling it.
I looked at that.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
I don't either. So I just continued to call it the SolarWinds compromise. I'm thinking like it's some marketing thing to try to get SolarWinds out of the name because that kind of genericizes it, right? It pulls some responsibility off them because people don't immediately associate SolarWinds with the compromise. It's SolarGate or Solari Gate or...
Yeah.
And we need gate in every compromise.
We
right?
do. Absolutely. That's the way these things go.
Watergate. Is there a COVID gate yet?
There will be at the rate we're going.
What was there? There was a whole bunch of gate. There was some gate with Trump, wasn't there?
Yes.
Probably.
There's been all sorts of gates.
Apple has had battery gate and antenna gate and
antenna gate. Yeah. all the gates.
So why are gates automatically associated with issues? What does a gate have to do with an issue?
I have no idea. They let you in or out of your backyard. That's all I know.
Or they keep people out of your backyard.
Not mine. Doesn't have a lock on it.
Oh. Anyways, this is what happens when we start off a new year. And we're still trying to come back from vacation and recover.
No,
or
I'm good. Like I said, I've been living a life lately. So a couple of things that we kind of skipped over last month. There's been some improvements in ARM land, specifically to ARM template deployments. So if you don't keep up to date with, you might keep up to date with ARM templates around maybe a given resource provider, like say you work with Compute a Lot and you're looking for a new option or property that you can set when you deploy your VMs and you've been waiting for it to be available via ARM template. You might look at things that way, or maybe you're looking at Bicep and looking at running deployments in different ways. They've built in support now in ARM templates for what if functionality, which is super nifty. So ARM has always had support for things like checking against policy and am I allowed to deploy a given resource? But it really didn't have a mechanism to say, what are the things that happen if I deploy this resource, or if I do something like redeploy this ARM template, right? What if say I had an ARM template, like I'm back to VMs and I want to resize my VMs in my ARM template, but I want to know what the impact of that is. What if I could fire off a what if command with my new updated template and have it show me exactly what's going to change within like a VM's hardware profile? I'm going to go from a standard DS blah, blah, blah to like an LS series because I'm doing something that needs an AMD CPU and, needs to be very memory optimized. So this is out and about. It is generally available It is built into all of the common tooling. So REST API, I don't think a lot of people fire off ARM templates via REST API though, but certainly PowerShell and the CLI to go ahead and play around with them. So if you do a what if deployment, you have a couple options. Like you can see friendly output come back to the terminal or console that you're in, or you can also have the result set come back as a JSON bundle, which then you can go ahead and enumerate over or do whatever you'd want to. So say you're maybe doing like a CI/CD pipeline, and you're running that through. You can actually check the JSON result programmatically, and maybe choose to actually deploy the template or not deploy the template based on an output of a what if result.
So, because I haven't looked at these yet, what are these what if results? What do they actually have the capability of checking? So let's stay in the VM space for a little bit, and you run a what if to resize your VM. Does it spit back things like, if you resize it, your public IP address is going to change and your VM is going to shut down? Or does it have the capability of going in and looking at the software? For instance, the software uses these particular resources. This VM is running at this load based on the software, and if you resize it, you're not going to have enough capacity. Like, what are those types of results that get spit back from these what ifs?
So nothing from inside the VMs or that are, like in the case of compute, tangential to the deployment. So I would consider something like the fact that your VM reboots. You should just know that. Why is the template going to tell you that?
Right.
Like that's the way the
hope.
platform operates. So that wouldn't be there. But in the case of, like, say specifically a VM resize, it's going to come back and it's going to tell you that within your VM you have a hardware profile, right? So it's a property within the properties for your VM. There's a thing called hardware profile that has an attribute called VM size. So it would say, hey, your VM size is going from standard blah, blah, blah to this other thing. So it would actually show you, like, for this specific property, whether it's new, add, or change, that you would see that in the output and have it come back to you.
So it spits back resource property changes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It will also potentially, like, if you do have policy that blocks within the environment, it would tell you because it's not going down the path of actually trying to submit and validate the deployment for you. Yep. But it can still tell you if, like, policy would have impacts. So as of GA, like, that wasn't there in the beginning of this feature, but as of GA, it is policy aware for things like modify effects.
Okay, so you're going to go deploy this. By the way, you're not going to actually be successful because it violates such and such a policy that's put in place.
Yep. That's it. So the documentation, I would say, is fairly good for this feature, as far as, like, how to get it set up, what you need in place from a tooling perspective, like if you're going to run PowerShell or the CLI locally versus maybe just doing Cloud Shell or something like that along the way. There's also a GitHub repo. So it's the ARM template what if issues repo. Like, it's not where ARM template what if actually gets developed, but it's where you can go and see all the existing issues or track issues. So if you do find an issue within this, like, you can just go log that in that GitHub repo, and then that team will take a look and triage it and figure out, like, well, is this something where we need to, say, go work with the compute team because it's a resource provider issue? Is it an issue inside PowerShell, the CLI? Is it the actual Azure Resource Manager REST APIs? Like where does that issue source from? And where does it need to be fixed?
Got it.
Yeah.
Very nifty.
So I thought that one was kind of, like, cool and fun and super easy to onboard with. And I think if you're ever in that boat of doing like CI/CD with, or you're doing the DevOps thing, right? Because that's what we tell everybody to do. This makes that world quite a bit easier because you no longer need to like submit a deployment and then like, okay, what are all the things it did? And then maybe go back and delete a resource group or delete just a specific resource and try and recreate all the things. Like what if is a pretty cool and powerful tool to have out there.
Yeah, I can see that because I've even had stuff too where I go try to change stuff and it fails for some reason, but to actually have that automatically built in and doing some of the what if stuff before I actually try it could be very handy.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, you've got support for what if. You've also got support for like confirmation. So once you've run your what if command and you want to run it again, like you can have use a switch parameter in like PowerShell, like -confirm, which will say like, are you sure you really want to do this and deploy kind of thing.
Got it.
And then get all your results back, which is nice.
Very cool. Yours sounds way easier to implement than the couple things I've been playing with recently.
Yeah, this is like download, run, throw a command line switch in.
Yes. Nifty. So do you want to know what I've been playing with recently?
Sure.
I've been playing with two things. One, and I just published a YouTube video on this one that goes out at some point in time today, is being able to use sensitivity labels now on groups, teams, and SharePoint sites, because all of those are really tied to Microsoft 365 groups.
they're almost all the same thing.
Yeah. So that was one I've been playing with recently that I honestly don't know exactly when it hit GA and all that. That's another story. And then another one I've been playing with is mobile device management and deployment of Apple products.
A little bit of MDM, huh?
A little bit of MDM, only it's very similar to like the autopilot for Windows, where these can be automatically enrolled when you ship them from Apple.
Oh, so you've been playing around with a configurator like Jamf or something like that?
Well, so not with Jamf. It's all built in now to Azure AD and the Apple Business Manager.
Ooh.
So, yeah, which one of these do you want to tackle? Because they're both interesting and definitely not as straightforward as your what if.
Well, let's. Why don't we start with sensitivity labels?
Pick your poison. Okay, I like this one better. This one's easier to talk about.
I know you do. This is. I'm here for you.
What did I drop some hints? So, sensitivity labels they've been around for a while, right? You've been able to tag emails, documents, all of those with sensitivity labels. This brings it to the containers, and again, I don't know when this hit. I started going out and looking on YouTube because I was going to push a video out there on, are there other videos about this? And I found one from a year ago, last December. But I am 99% sure I have not seen this in my tenant up until very recently.
It might not have been in your tenant. It was just in everybody else's.
Right, just everybody's but mine. And then I saw some stuff that trickle out about it like March, April timeframe, but COVID, who knows what I missed in that time. But essentially what this lets you do is now you can, instead of putting sensitivity labels on your content, on, again, emails, files, that type of stuff, you can put them on the containers themselves. So on a SharePoint site, on a Microsoft Teams team, or on a Microsoft or Office 365 group, which essentially, as you and I both know, Microsoft 365 group, and hopefully lots of other people know, Microsoft 365 groups are kind of that underlying membership level of Teams and SharePoint. So really you're applying these to a group and it trickles down to those associated resources. And one thing to be aware of is because you put these on that container, on the group, site, team, protects the container, but this isn't something that gets inherited down to all the content within the container. So this team has the sensitivity label, but you can still assign all these other sensitivity labels within the team on the content within the team. And by default, or not at all, frankly, none of the content that you add is just going to get the sensitivity label by default.
So it's not recursive, right?
It's not. It's not a recursive.
It is for the container itself. So in this case, like I create a SharePoint site and I label the SharePoint site as private. Well, now that's just a label that exists at that level. And then the first time I upload a document to that site or through like a connected team or something like that, then that has its own independent settings.
Yes, it does not get that same label that the team or the SharePoint site has. So there's a few things, and this is why I have a YouTube video about this as well, that, again, go check it out. We'll put it in the show notes. There's a few things you have to do to set it up. So the first of these is you actually have to enable your Microsoft Information Protection labels within Azure AD. So you have to go use like the Azure AD preview module, connect to Azure AD, go into your Azure AD org-wide settings and flip the MIP, and I can't remember the exact setting, but it's in all the documentation. Essentially flip that from false to true so that Azure AD is aware of the ability to use these sensitivity labels. And then you have to go connect to your Security and Compliance Center and go say, now sync all of my sensitivity labels from Security and Compliance into Azure AD. Because again, it's really tied to all these Microsoft 365 groups in the backend. So there's a little bit of that has to be done initially. And then once all that's done, you can go create sensitivity labels. And now as you create these, you can actually define the scope of this label to files and emails or groups and sites. So there's a couple different checkboxes there. And then there's also an Azure Purview Assets checkbox, but we're just going to avoid Purview for now.
Yeah, protect all your stuff in blobs.
Yeah. So once you check groups and sites, you get a few different options. And this is where it was kind of cool to me and where I started. I was like, this is kind of nifty. So once you go set those checkboxes and you start publishing these, what you can do is within these various sensitivity labels, you can define things like what sharing level is allowed. Anyone, new guests, existing guests, or internal only. So you can define now, associated with the sensitivity label, what sharing level is allowed. You can set up if people can download files or if it's web-based only, specifically in your SharePoint sites. And you can define, in the case of like teams and groups, is when people create it, are they allowed to select private? Are they allowed to select public? Or are you giving it up to them to choose the right one? So you could define like a SharePoint site for clients that maybe you say these all have to be public, and a sensitivity label for internal only, and these are all going to be private, and sharing is not going to be allowed. So now as users go through and create Teams or Microsoft 365 groups or SharePoint sites, they choose the sensitivity label, and you're forced into this is going to be a private team or this is going to be a public team. And these are the enforced sharing levels because this container has that sensitivity label on it. So
given that things are not recursive, do those kinds of settings, are they locked in place? So if I choose the sensitivity label, like it's confidential, internal only, and that locks it to private, can I then go back as like a site collection admin and change things to public, or does it just get locked because of the label on the container?
It gets locked in because of that container.
So they would actually have to go and change the sensitivity label.
Right, they'd have to go
container.
change the sensitivity label.
So, all right. So given that, I guess my other question would be, because there's lots of settings that can be part of a sensitivity label, right? Like you can kind of have the the privacy level. There's certain things around access control, like all that kind of stuff. Can I view so when I'm creating a new site, like you said, a new drop down is going to pop in, right, where I select the sensitivity. Is there like info for me on what each of those sensitivities does, or do I need to know like through like my internal training, like, okay, these sensitivity labels, here's what they mean for a document, and now here's what they mean for a site?
There is. So when you create these sensitivity labels, you can actually set both the I was looking at something. You can set both a end user description of the sensitivity label and an administrator description of the sensitivity label. So as you go create teams and SharePoint sites and all of those, as you go through and you like look at your different options for sensitivity labels, you see all of those end user descriptions there. So you can know, okay, this is going to control these settings. This should be chosen in this certain scenario, et cetera, et cetera. So you can provide that information to your end users if you're allowing them to just go in and create these teams and groups and all that through the normal SharePoint interface.
Gotcha.
Or Teams interface.
Sense. Yep.
So, but yeah, even mine, like, for instance, I go into my Teams admin center now, and I go pick one of those sites that I have a sensitivity label applied to. And if you drop down like your privacy setting, the one that doesn't comply with that sensitivity label is actually completely grayed out. So the only way for me to get a different privacy level with that public versus private is to change the sensitivity label itself.
Yeah, like as an end user or an admin, go in and actually reclassify the container. I think one of the other things that happens along the way is you'd probably have to be pretty careful as you roll this out, in that once these containers are being created with these labels, like whether it is groups or sites or teams, whatever it happens to be, you probably just can't go back or don't want to go back and start like flipping buttons and making changes within the protected labels themselves and hoping that stuff's going to be like instantaneous and trickle down. I'm just thinking, like, if it does come out of Azure AD, there's probably some propagation process that takes time, and who knows if it actually updates at all.
Yes. Well, and who also knows what type of vulnerabilities you would be opening yourself up to, if especially if your end users are creating sites and classifying them a certain way, and then you go in and change that classification on them. You may inadvertently make your organization non-compliant with various things. Because you as an admin may not know what's in that site, because a lot of times your end users have a better idea of the data in a site than the admins do. And what security settings or compliance settings need to be applied to it. The other thing I did find is, once you create these sensitivity labels, you can go in and start adding them to already created teams and SharePoint sites and groups and all of those. When you add them to existing ones, I did not see them trickling down. In the case of, like, I went in and assigned a sensitivity label to a team, and I actually gave it like 48 or 72 hours. It did not show up as a sensitivity label on the associated SharePoint site in that time frame. So I did have to go in and assign the same sensitivity label to both the team and the SharePoint site. When I was editing an existing one, if I created them net new, it got applied to all of the resources when I created a new one. I would have hoped that would get fixed, because frankly, it's kind of a pain.
Little bit, right?
And I feel like you open yourself up there, because I haven't tried to make a change to one that I created net new, but I feel like it could definitely lead to some inconsistencies there.
Yeah, it sounds like one of those kind of like rough edges that you just need to be aware of.
Right. Or 72 hours wasn't enough time, given what you said about some stuff has to propagate down.
Yeah.
But it is, again, I don't know how long this has been there, but I feel like it just showed up in my tenant recently.
If not, it's new to you.
If not, it's new to me, and I discovered a lot of stuff playing with it for a few hours one day, getting it all set up and testing it out with different teams and groups. And again, you can go into your properties in Azure AD and set these on Microsoft 365 groups right within Azure AD, Teams Admin Center, SharePoint Admin Center. And it did take different amounts of times for new labels to show up in these different places because it does propagate through everything.
Yep. And for propagation, like it is specifically the containers that you talked about. So it's not other things that might be associated with said container. So for example, let's say we create a team and then we go and create a planner plan, which is also associated with said team. Like planner doesn't support sensitivity labels.
Correct. Although right now I don't think planner also supports external users, but it's another story.
Yammer
do external users now.
I think Yammer, Dynamics, Project, Power BI.
Yeah.
Like, those are all external to like this existing process.
Yes,
right?
to this existing one, it's only those 3 products that I have seen where this is an applicable setting is Teams, SharePoint sites, and Office 365 groups.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's kind of fun. It's something I can see that's useful. I need to dig through the documentation because there's also, I think, some licensing things that come into play here. Because especially when you're doing like choosing between web-based only and allowing users to download it, essentially what that has to be using based on the back end of how all this works is conditional access policies at the site level, which we all know conditional access policies are Azure AD Premium, either Plan 1 or Plan 2. Yeah. So I believe there's some Azure AD Premium licensing that comes into play here too, because of features that sensitivity labels have to use in order to lock down these various resources.
Yep.
With some of those controls around web only and web or download.
Let's see. To benefit from automatic labeling, users must be licensed for Azure Information Protection P2, which is included in Enterprise Mobility and Security E5, A5, and G5, as well as the Microsoft 365 E5, A5, and G5, or the Microsoft 365 E5, A5, G5 compliance, and or Microsoft 365 information protection and governance. Wow.
Yes. Well, so that's automatic though. So automatic is different than the manual.
Oh, I'm sorry. So sensitivity labels are Microsoft 365, E5, A5, G5, E3, A3, G3, F1, F3, Business Premium, Enterprise Mobility and Security, F3, E3, E5, Office 365, E5, A5, E3, A3, F3, AIP Plan 1, and AIP Plan 2.
Yes.
All allow for manual sensitivity labeling.
So
and
that gives you
about a like mess of products and plans there.
Right. Well, and that gives you the option for sensitivity labels, but I don't know how that ties in yet to when you're using sensitivity labels to essentially do conditional access at the SharePoint site level.
Well, I'm sure you need the extra license for
that. Is my assumption, but as I was going through this, I did not see it documented anywhere. Doesn't mean you don't need it. I just did not run across where it actually documented that, because certain functionality is conditional access, other functionality is just standard, and it's all kind of mixed and matched in this GUI interface, and there's no way for a user to know unless you know what's it's doing under the covers.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
A little bit.
From a licensing perspective. So if I can find that, we'll throw a link in the show notes or clarify it there. But I am just going out on an assumption that if a sensitivity label uses functionality that's included or that requires Azure AD Premium to be licensed, you probably need that license to adhere to the terms of service when you're using that functionality within sensitivity labels. Kind of like the whole licensing
Yep,
thing
that
with
sounds about
external users and using Azure AD Premium functionality for an external user. Similar type of story.
That's your story, and you're sticking to
Wow.
it, huh?
I am going to stick with that. So that is my fun with sensitivity labels, and your fun with what ifs with ARM templates. And as I said, yours was way more simple.
Well, wait until I get you to talk about Apple Business Manager for automatic user provisioning next time.
I have to get that set up yet. However, to test this out, I also need to order a device from Apple.
Well, I mean, should you have to order a new iPad, that's what you need to do. You can just send it to my house. I'll test it for you.
M1 Air. Come on, Scott. I have plenty of iPads. I don't have an M1 device.
There you go. That
let's face it.
We found you're in.
I have. It just took me a little while. But yes, we will have to talk about that one too, because that one is fascinating. Just to give you a little tidbit, you can actually set up federated authentication between Apple and Azure AD. So your Apple login for Apple ID.
Your Apple ID. So all the stuff that comes out of like what is it? IDMSA on the Apple side.
Yes, is actually your Azure AD credentials.
Ooh, that's nifty.
It really is. I haven't gotten this all set up, but yeah, you can sync like all your credentials. So I actually am going in and all of my Azure AD users are syncing with Apple. So whet your appetite a little bit, but that is way more than we should probably get into in today's episode.
Maybe just a little bit.
So we'll wrap it up for today. Enjoy maybe one more slow week before everybody dives in head first and starts ramping up for 2021.
Yeah, well, we'll see how that goes. The emails continue to flow as the morning goes on.
All right. Well, yeah, they're just waking up over there, right?
Yeah. We're getting to about Redmond time. Yep.
Yes, that we are. All right. Sounds good. Enjoy your day, Scott. We will talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, Ben.